The Holy Gospel according to John. Now, a certain man was ill, Lazarus of Bethany, the village of Mary and her sister Martha. Mary was the one who anointed the Lord with perfume and wiped his feet with her hair. Her brother Lazarus was ill. So the sisters sent a message to Jesus: Lord, he whom you love is ill. But when Jesus heard it, he said, This illness does not lead to death. Rather, it is for God's glory, so that the Son of God may be glorified through it. Accordingly, though he loved Martha and her sister and Lazarus, after having heard that Lazarus was ill, he stayed 2 days longer in the place where he was. Then after this, he said to the disciples, Let us go to Judea again. The disciples said to him, Rabbi, the Jews were just now trying to stone you, and are you going there again? Jesus answered, Are there not 12 hours of daylight? Those who walk during the day do not stumble because they see the light of this world. But those who walk at night stumble because the light is not in them. After saying this, he told them, Our friend Lazarus has fallen asleep, and I'm going there to waken him. The disciples said, Lord, if he has fallen asleep, he will be all right. Jesus, however, had been speaking about his death, but they thought he was referring merely to sleep. Then Jesus told them plainly, Lazarus is dead. For your sake, I'm glad I was not there, so that you may believe. But let us go to him. Thomas, who is called the twin, said to his fellow disciples, Let us go also, that we may die with him. When Jesus arrived, he found that Lazarus had already been in the tomb 4 days. Now Bethany was near Jerusalem, some 2 miles away, and many of the Jews had come to Mary and Martha to console them about their brother. When Martha heard that Jesus was coming, she went and met him, while Mary stayed at home. Martha said to Jesus, Lord, if you had been here, my brother would not have died. But even now, I know that God will give you whatever you ask of him. Jesus said to her, Your brother will rise again. Martha said to him, I know that he will rise again in the resurrection on the last day. Again, Jesus said to her, I am the resurrection and the life. Those who believe in me, even though they die, will live. And everyone who lives and believes in me will never die. Do you believe this? She said to him, Yes, Lord. I believe that you are the Messiah, the Son of God, the one coming into the world. When she said this, she went back and called her sister Mary and told her privately, The teacher is here, and he is calling for you. And when she heard it, she got up quickly and went to him. Now Jesus had not yet come to the village, but was still at the place where Martha had met him. The Jews who were with her in the house, consoling her, saw Mary get up quickly and go out. They followed her because they thought she was going to the tomb to weep there. When Mary came where Jesus was and saw him, she knelt at his feet and said to him, Lord, if you had been here, my brother would not have died. When Jesus saw her weeping, and the Jews who came with her also weeping, he was greatly disturbed in spirit and deeply moved. He said, Where have you laid him? They said to him, Lord, come and see. Jesus began to weep. So the Jews said, See how he loved him. But some of them said, Could not he who opened the eyes of the blind man have kept this man from dying? Then Jesus, again greatly disturbed, came to the tomb. It was a cave, and a stone was laying against it. Jesus said, Take away the stone. Martha, the sister of the dead man, said to him, Lord, already there is a stench because he's been dead for 4 days. Jesus said to her, Did I not tell you that if you believed, you would see the glory of God? So they took away the stone. And Jesus looked upward and said, Father, I thank you for having heard me. I knew that you always heard me, but I have said this for the sake of the crowd standing near, so that they may believe you sent me. When he had said this, he cried with a loud voice, "Lazarus, come out." The dead man came out. His hands and feet were bound with strips of cloth, and his face wrapped in a cloth. Jesus said to them, "Unbind him and let him go." Many of the Jews, therefore, who had come with Mary and had seen what Jesus did, believed in him. The gospel of the Lord. Well, again, marvelous tale from John here. This guy, Lazarus, where Jesus had been not that long ago, according to the narrative, had had supper there. Mary, Lazarus's little sister, had broken open a jar of ointment, had poured it on Jesus' feet, anointing him, and then wiped it with her hair, it says. Now, Lazarus is sick. In fact, he dies. By the time the message gets to Jesus, and again, it's only 2 miles away, so they must have been doing a good bit of searching for him in Jerusalem. The message finally gets there, and Jesus still says, "Let's wait." Then, in one of the strangest comical turns in any of John's writing, Jesus is saying, "He's asleep. I'll go take care of it when I get there. I'll go and awaken him," he says. And the disciple says, "Well, if he's only fallen asleep, everything's going to be all right." And then Jesus said, "No, he's dead." And then he says, "For your sake, I'm glad I wasn't there. I'm glad I wasn't there to save him from dying, because now you're really going to see something. You're really going to see the power of God at work." But here's the thing. We get caught up in that lighthearted, if we can say that almost comical moment where Jesus says, "He's asleep. I'll go and awaken him." Well, if he's asleep, everything's okay. What Jesus is telling us at that moment is death is sleep. It's only temporary. Just like you go to sleep and wake up every day, so it is that with Christ, death is only temporary. Here's the beautiful thing about the story of Lazarus, about the story of Jairus's daughter. Remember the man whose daughter had passed away, and others who have died, and Jesus himself, who will go to the cross and suffer the ignominious death of crucifixion at the hands of the Romans. The point of all those stories is that death is not the final word. Death doesn't get the last say. No matter what happens to us, no matter what we go through in life, even death, those circumstances don't have the last word. It's Christ who has the last word. It's God who has the last say in what goes on. That's comforting for us because we know that mercy triumphs over judgment. No matter what human justice may sound like, God's justice is always centered around healing. No matter what has happened, those who were by the pool, who were waiting for the waters to be troubled so they can jump in, Jesus can come and say, "You don't need to wait for that. You've got me." Then when Martha sees him, Martha has this ability to chastise Jesus. They're obviously good friends. So when Martha sees Jesus, she goes, "If you'd been here, this didn't have to happen. If you had been here, my brother would not have died." That's a good statement of faith. I believe in you. And if you had been here, he would not have died. Jesus tells her, well, you know that he's going to rise again. And she kind of goes, yeah. We all know about the resurrection on the last day. Now, here's an important point. Clearly, this is the sensibility of people in the first century in Judea. Now, the Sadducees still did not believe in the resurrection. They didn't believe in an afterlife. They didn't believe on the resurrection of all things at the last day. But the others, the Pharisees and others like them, they did. And this was the common held belief at the day, is that there would come a time when all the dead will experience life again. Now, they tend to think that it's life that is going to be renewed here on this earth. Wasn't a sense of them being someplace else, just that they would be resurrected on the last day. So Martha goes, yeah, we know, we all know that. She's challenging Jesus. You know, every time I look at the instances where Jesus is challenged, where God is challenged, even in the Hebrew Bible, that challenge, when in faith, always has a moment or a reward of revelation. Martha says, yeah, you could have done it. You didn't. I know he'll be back on the last day. And Jesus said, no, I am the resurrection and the life. Those who believe in me, even if they die, they will live. And anyone who lives and believes in me will never die. Death doesn't have the last word. And then he says to Martha, do you believe this? She said, yes, Lord. I believe that you are the Messiah, the Son of God, the one coming into the world. Now she turns around and runs back to go get Mary. And when she goes and gets Mary, who in the Jewish tradition, she was sitting Shiva, as they say. And only someone of great authority, usually a husband, is the only one who can call them out of sitting Shiva. Well, Martha goes and tells Mary, Jesus is here. In fact, he's calling for you. She gets up. And the Jewish folk around her think, oh, she must be going to the tomb to cry a little bit more. But Jesus still hadn't come to where they lived. He was still out there where Martha had met him. And he waits for Mary to come to him. When she sees him, she kneels at his feet again and said the same thing Martha said. If you had been here, my brother would not have died. Jesus was moved at this. Okay, where have you laid him? Well, come and see. Here's a cave with a rock rolled in front of it. And Jesus says, all right, take it away. Wait a minute. It's been 4 days. He's going to be a little stinky right now. Take it away. Didn't I tell you that if you believed, you would see the glory of God? So they rolled away the stones. And then I love this prayer of Jesus. I thank you for having heard me. I know that you always hear me. But I said this for everybody else standing around, so that they may believe that you sent me. Just thank you for hearing me. He doesn't really ask anything, does he? At least not what's recorded. All he says is, you hear me, and I know that you always hear me. And I want these mooks to hear this prayer. Okay. Lazarus, come out. Next thing you know, out comes Lazarus. Feet, hands, all bound up with strips of cloth. His face with a cloth covering him. Jesus said, let him go. Unbind him. He's alive. Stop dressing him up like he's dead. Mary Martha standing around, stunned, but also many of the Jews who were there, who had come along with Mary, saw what happened, and it says they believed him. Well, yeah, if you see somebody, okay, look, healing somebody who's blind, that's a pretty good deal. Healing a leper, impressive. Calling back somebody from the dead, yeah, you bet I believe. That's why Jesus says that these miracles are for those who don't believe, so that they will believe. But one more time, this is the good news that's being spread along. And all the stories of the healings, and especially the resurrections, is remember, your circumstance right now isn't the last word. Even death doesn't have the final say. Only God, and Jesus standing in the name of God, that's where the last word resides. So no matter what happens, no matter what tragedy, no matter what job loss, no matter what horrible, tragic loss of a loved one, it's not the last word. Only Christ gets the last word. Thank God for that.